Ladies and gentlemen, this is the ultimate MSNBC election night meltdown compilation that I'm going to be reacting to, and you'll get to see the joyous energy. It's funny when you watch these news networks and they're supposed to be non-biased and very clear they're on one side. And MSNBC, I did a video like a few weeks ago reacting to the results and MSNBC having to declare a winner. If you guys remember on election night, the liberal networks were very, very conservative, no pun intended, in the way they would call the swing states, because every single one of them was going to Donald Trump, and the decision desk was really the only one that would put their names out there and call things outside of Fox News calling Pennsylvania. But a lot of these, like CNN didn't call anything. They were always late. MSNBC, they're all late because they don't want to admit it. And finally they end up calling it, and you can hear Jen Psaki just immediately, as she's announcing Trump won, she's like, guys, we have some big news here. The little news is that Trump won. The big news is that Trump's horrible. Like that's what it was. So let's take a look at this.
All the anticipation, all the excitement, all the anxiety, all the doom scrolling, all the manic refreshing of polling averages. It has all been leading to this hour. And we know you have every choice in the world for where to spend tonight, so we're really grateful that you're spending it with us, and we hope you'll be with us through the duration.
By the way, what happened to their ratings?
Yes.
How you feeling?
Good.
Are you guys doing okay, too?
Yes, we're doing great. Kamala.
I was going to ask who you're going to vote for, but I didn't need to.
Kamala, because lives matter.
First time voting? As you know, this is where the Harris campaign wants to drive up the numbers to sort of counteract that T in the middle of Pennsylvania
And this was one of their major copes. They're like, oh, there's really long lines in Philadelphia and the major cities. And when they were losing Pennsylvania, they said, no, they're going to get a bunch of late vote.
counteract the rural votes that the Trump campaign is expected to get.
And so what you've seen in the last couple of weeks, if this is an audition for managing a complex organization like the United States, Kamala Harris has passed the audition flawlessly. This has been, in many ways, a perfect campaign. And what the campaign...
A perfect campaign.
...is talking about now is the granular get out the vote effort that you just don't see on the other side. On the other side, you're seeing Charlie Kirk going on X Twitter this morning and begging people to vote.
Right, and so that's just her not understanding how elections work and how you motivate people to vote. I told people a week or two before the election, when there were a bunch of Republican people that were saying, you got to get out and vote. These numbers are alarming. There's so many more women voting than men. That's how it always works. Women normally vote more than men anyways, like 54% to 46%, but it's even more exaggerated during the early voting because they also vote even more than men with the early vote. The reason you say that, if you're a Republican, say get out and vote and scare people into voting, it's like you want to motivate people. You want to show people, listen, we're losing. You always want to act like you're losing. And so Joy Reid, she's got no understanding of that. She thinks that, oh my God, they're doing this because they're going to lose and they're so desperate. No, they're just trying to make sure people get out and vote. So that's a tactic to use. Like, everyone needs to vote. This is really important. Look at all the women voting. Men, go out and vote. That's what the Republicans used. And these people, it's such a simple concept that they can't grasp, that no, they're not panicking. It's more so a strategy to use to make sure people vote.
Last week has been a very good close for Kamala Harris, not a good close for Donald Trump. He hasn't been able to fill the rallies. He's addled. He has racist comedians opening. Whatever. It's been a trashy week for Donald Trump.
And so that's just not true at all. It's just simply not true. If you look at any of the polls, Trump closed very, very well. That's why I was really confident going into election night. And then these people, it's just so delusional. Like, no, what you're saying is not true. This is just pure liberal cope propaganda. She did not close well. Any of the polls will tell you that Trump the last week closed extremely well. And then they talk about like a racist comedian, like that has any bearing. You know what? The racist comedian probably hurt the Democrats. And obviously Tony Hinchcliffe, what he said was fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a joke that Puerto Rico has an issue with trash. We know that. That's the joke. But then what Hinchcliffe said, that comment, then caused the response by Biden to where he called all of Trump supporters garbage, which is 10 times worse than what Hinchcliffe said. And they want to talk about what Hinchcliffe said. And this is what they're saying leading into election night. This is why they thought she was going to win, because Tony Hinchcliffe made a joke about Puerto Ricans and Trump closed very bad. And this is what they're citing.
It's been a very strong week for Kamala Harris.
ASU, the campus that we're on right now, ASU students, the population is about 74,000. So a lot of people voting.
Now completed of those rural, heavily Trump counties. We're talking about places where he's going to get 70, 75, 80% of the vote. In all 10 that have now been completed, Trump's vote share relative to 2020 has gone up.
I'm just going to give a couple of everybody take a breath warnings here. We don't know what's going to happen in Georgia. It's like a baby blue state, I'm going to say, and that it has not been blue for a long time. It is a hard state for the Harris team.
One of the things.
Right, and so they're starting the cope once Trump goes up in Georgia. They're like, well, she doesn't need Georgia. She doesn't need North Carolina. All that matters is the Rust Belt. We just have to win the Rust Belt. So the night rapidly goes into this, worship around the Rust Belt. Like, we just need the Rust Belt. Georgia doesn't matter. Harris didn't need Georgia. It's not a big deal.
Things that was so striking about the public polling and the public data going into this election was that the public polling said this is the closest race that we've ever had.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, that was the consensus view. And there was a real question about, well, maybe the...
Not necessarily. I mean, listen, the polling was close, but if you put all the polls together in an aggregate, I think the final Real Clear Politics number was Trump 287. What was it? Harris 251. Which is a close election, but it's not like these people make it seem like, oh my God, every single state was going to be decided by a single vote. And again, they're also not understanding when you compare to 2020 and 2016 and the Trump overperformance in those years relative to the polls, they're not taking that into account at all. What liberals actually did, and I forgot who it was. I think it was Anthony Scaramucci or whatever, the one dude that, we used to work for Trump. They fell for it to where they're like, well, now the polls are going to overcorrect. Because do you guys remember that narrative when obviously the polls underestimated Trump significantly in 2020 and 2016? And then they're like, oh, now they're going to overcorrect and they're going to overestimate Trump because they don't want to underestimate him again. Well, guess what? They underestimated him again. But the polls were not the problem. They were relatively fine.
Public polling's wrong, and maybe it's going to miss a few points in one direction or another. We don't know at this point. It's very early in the evening. But I would say at 8:50, it's a very, very close race.
Yeah, I'd say that if you are just joining us right this second at 8:52:06, and I had to summarize what's going on, no surprises.
Yeah, right.
Pretty much that's what's happening.
No surprises. At that point, Trump was trouncing her in Florida. And look, we knew Trump was going to win Florida, but that was a good sign. Whether or not you think Florida matters anymore because it's a Republican state, the fact that at this point, around 9 o'clock, I think he was up by 11 or 12 points, if I remember, because Florida gets it in really quickly. These were good signs for Trump. There was good signs in Georgia. If you're Harris at this point, I mean, certainly she at this point still could have won, but they were certainly good signs for Trump.
Happened thus far. In Georgia, it's too close to call. In Pennsylvania, it's too close to call. In Wisconsin, it's too close to call. In Michigan, sing it with me now. It's too close to call.
They're hyperventilating.
I think when you watched what Donald Trump did in 2020, what Democrats were fantasizing about was a landslide victory. And so some of what was wanted and desired was a sweep that really wasn't on the table.
Oh, you mean putting in a VP that's got a historically bad approval rating doesn't result in a landslide victory? Who could have seen that coming?
We live in an evenly divided country, and it creates anxiety, but it also requires patience.
It is fairly shocking. And I don't think it's something that should make us super proud. You just think about just the last 2 weeks and the things that Donald Trump has said. If all of that gets you half of the votes.
48.
And so here comes the cope that, oh my God, the reality is setting in. It's not going to be a landslide win. It's going to be close. And Joy Reid she's like, oh we might lose.
49%.
What does it tell you? I mean, we need to really take a step back and
no, Joy, we're all racist. That's what America is. Just come on. Remember the white lash with Van Jones in 2016. That's what it always goes to with these people. And it's like an immediate trigger mechanism with these people. What is wrong with our country? My candidate is not winning in a landslide. There's something seriously wrong with this country and how disgustingly racist it is.
About what does that say about us?
I mean, blue wall, baby, there was always going to be a blue wall night. Some of the
blue wall cope
fantasies, right, of a landslide victory that would erase any doubt, that would eradicate, the threat. I think it's going to be a late night. The polls have accurately captured this dead heat.
Ari, since you were last with us, I've got nothing to report.
Well, the crowd here is still large, is still loud, but a little bit more subdued. And the word that I keep hearing is the idea that people here are nauseously optimistic, not just cautiously optimistic.
Well, they're getting bad numbers, and this is like the Hillary Clinton 2016 glass ceiling Javits Center, where you can just see throughout the night with the liberals, you know, it keeps, whenever they cut to their headquarters, it keeps getting more somber, and there's less people there, and like you can see the writing on the wall.
But not.
This is 11:18 at night. And by 11:18, it was looking really, really good for Trump. I don't remember like the exact numbers in terms of the betting or anything like that, but it was looking really good. Wait, 11:18, they still had Georgia too close to... Man, they still had Georgia too close and North Carolina too early. I'm trying to remember 11:18. I mean, by 11:18, Georgia and North Carolina were gone for Trump. They were Trump's. Harris was not going to win either of those states.
Cautiously optimistic. The real focus now is on that blue wall in the Midwest. They knew that this was going to be a long night and that it was going to be a real nail biter, and it appears that that is exactly what we're looking at right now.
We've been saying for weeks, says O'Malley Dillon, quote, that this race might not be called tonight. Those of you who...
And then here comes like there was like a 30-minute window where they're like, oh, it's not going to get called tonight, guys, because they were doing terrible. So they're like, you know what? They started spinning the narrative. It's not going to get called tonight. This is how democracy works. Katie Hobbs, yeah, we take 40 years to count one single county. That's just normal democracy. If you don't agree with that, then you know you're an election denier. But then they started this quote for like 30 minutes, but then they realized it was such a blowout. They're like, he's going to win tonight.
Email is to say to the people on the team, hang in there, guys. Like, it's not over. We're still getting votes in. We still need to keep talking to people, keep people in lines, tell your grandma it's going to be okay.
We now have an NBC News call in the first one, Joy. North Carolina called for Donald Trump.
Yep, and so it was,
We now have all the voting in Luzerne County. Donald Trump is going to win this by a little bit more than 20.
News now projects that in the battleground state of Georgia in the presidential race, Donald Trump has prevailed. The Republican Party will control the United States Senate. This is live from Howard University in Washington, D.C.
We still have
John Podesta
votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted. Thank you all.
You know you lost with something like that.
A short and to-the-point statement from Cedric Richmond, the Harris campaign co-chair. You now see them turn as one to start to leave the grounds.
They're all just leaving like little ants.
The evening was getting increasingly somber as people realized what this map is looking like. They turned off the TV set and just piped up the music.
They turned off the TV and cranked up the music.
Because the room was starting to get increasingly somber.
But why turn off the TV if technically you still have a chance. You're just giving up and just say, oh, just listen to music.
You know, we always knew it was going to be down to the blue wall, and the blue wall is still uncalled at this point. But it sounds like the Harris campaign is sort of keeping things tight in terms of whether or not they're going to string people along into thinking this is going to happen.
What they went to that venue tonight hoping to see and witness was a historic election of Kamala Harris to the presidency.
Yeah.
Was the end of the Trump era as they knew it. And
it's the exact opposite. He won every single swing state in the popular vote.
We don't know the outcome yet, but that is not what they are receiving, and they are being told to go home and wait till tomorrow.
They're basically saying, we're losers, go home.
And nothing that was true yesterday about how flawlessly this campaign was run is not true now. I mean, this really was an historic, flawlessly run campaign. Queen Latifah never endorses anyone. She came out and endorsed.
Celebrity endorsements don't matter. I actually think they're a negative, and they should be a negative to normal American middle-class people. Why would you care what someone who's way richer, way more famous, has a way better life, has it way easier than you? Why would you care what their political opinion is, and also the fact that they think they can influence you in a way to vote away because that's the way they're voting. Why would they have any influence over politics?
You know, I mean, she had every prominent celebrity voice. She had the Swifties. She had the Beehive. Like, you couldn't.
By the way, they totally botched that Taylor Swift endorsement, didn't they, when that came out? Was that right after the debate? I mean, it was just like, it was such a non-story.
Not have run a better campaign.
In Western Europe and in the UK.
Oh my God, they're going to have to pay for stuff now. They're going to have to actually stop ripping off the United States and up their military budget. Oh my goodness.
And in the Middle East, people are waking up to this.
Oh, and they are.
I've gotten people.
And they actually have to take accountability now for stuff, and they're so pissed off about it. I know.
From Western Europe who are extraordinarily alarmed and terrified.
They're terrified they actually have to control their own country and its its self-defense rather than rely on the United States. It's horrible.
Great. There are 2 of the 7 swing states that have been called by NBC News right now, which is Georgia and North Carolina. None of the other 5 states have been called at this point. You can see.
I don't know what time this was, but listen, I think they held out on calling them as long as they possibly could.
This is the battleground states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the so-called blue wall. None of those states called by NBC News. In the swing state of Pennsylvania, NBC News now projects that presidential contest has been won by Donald Trump.
And they still didn't call the election at this point because Alaska wasn't called. So it's like, oh, he's only at like 266 or whatever. And then they called Wisconsin, and then that's when they finally announced that he had won. And then that's when Jen Psaki did her whole monologue. But either way, guys, just kind of a funny reaction to MSNBC. It's, CNN, I wonder what the comparison would be if they did a CNN full compilation with all the clips and stuff like that. But this wasn't even like after the election when Joy Reid goes off. But you can tell even during it when they're realizing that it's looking better and better for Trump, there's an immediate call like, what's happening to the country? How are we doing this? Europe is, oh my God, they're clutching their pearls. They're so nervous. And honestly, Europe, most of them, of course, wanted Trump to lose. They wanted the situation with Russia, Ukraine to continue as is with funding for Ukraine, and Trump obviously said that's not going to happen. And the Republicans said, no, it's not going to happen. So there's going to be a disruption there and hopefully some type of peace deal. But they really didn't want that. They wanted somehow, I don't even know what they want. I guess they want NATO to push Russia out of Ukraine at this point. But either way, guys, just kind of a funny little reaction there to the MSNBC cope on election night. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.